Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are live. We are live. Welcome to the Sound of Accra live Q&A. Thank you so much for joining us. Pleasure to have Akua Nyame-Mensah join us today. How are you feeling?
I'm good. And I'm just like, as I was telling you before, this is so professional. This is awesome. I'm learning so much by going through this with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Just before we kind of get into into today's lunchtime conversation, just drop a message on the chat. Let us know where you're listening from, whatever city, town, country you're listening from. Let us know, what you're hoping to get from today's session. Yeah, just drop a message in the chat. Let us know that you can hear us. Let us know that that we actually exist, so we can know that you guys are around, so that we can start this session. And also, if you're watching on LinkedIn, if you're watching YouTube, please hit that like button. Please hit that heart, the insight button, whatever. Please do engage with this, so that this content can go out to more people who need to see this content. Whilst we're waiting for some content, whilst we're waiting for some comments and some questions to come in, Akua, I think it would be great for you to kind of like introduce yourself. Okay, so we'll now start to get some comments. So James says thumbs up. Thank you very much, James. Okay, so yeah, I think it would be good for us to maybe do a little icebreaker, and then
Okay.
give it a bit more time for people to kind of like join the stream and to kind of like interact with the session. I think first of all, thanks again for joining us today. I think it would be great for people to kind of like get a little quick elevator pitch in terms of like who you are and what you're doing at the moment. I know you're doing some amazing things. Of course, for those of you guys who don't know, Akua also is a podcaster. She has a podcast called The Open Door Podcast, which Open Door Conversations, which she's going to get into. She's also a coach, a facilitator. She's a previous MD, so she has a lot of experience. So she's going to go into a bit more detail in terms of who she is and what she does. But before we can get into the meat of the show, Akua, please just give a quick elevator pitch in terms of like who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I always love to start off actually by spelling my name. So for those who've never seen my name before, it means girl born on Wednesday. So it's it's great, really simple name right there. But my dad is, from Ghana, so it's Akua. My mom is from the US, so people typically say Akua there. And I grew up primarily in Francophone West Africa, also a bit of time in North Africa, and then also spent some time living and working in Nigeria as well. And they typically refer to me as Aqua. So I have a very diverse background. I've had the opportunity to live and work in many different places, and that's also what I incorporate into the work that I do. So I'm a certified executive and leadership coach, recognized facilitator and speaker, which is just a fancy way of saying that I love supporting leaders. And specifically, I love supporting leaders who were in a place that I was when I first started my career. So my first real job was actually launching and running an online platform for a really well-funded startup. And even with all the resources, I still was juggling a lot of different responsibilities. I wasn't sure which of my stakeholders to please first. I very much felt reluctant at times to sort of step up into that leadership position. And so I really support leaders with trying to figure out how to manage their time and energy. And at the end of the day, it's really my job through my speaking, through my coaching, and through my workshops to take them from being reactive, right? So sort of just feeling like they have to respond to things and they don't really have a good way of doing that, to proactive. And so being proactive for some leaders is being productive. Being proactive for some leaders is sort of thriving. So really just recognizing that, one, there's no one right way to show up. There's no one right way to be a leader, but it really does start with cultivating your self-awareness to realize that, hey, I don't like the way I'm showing up and I can do something differently.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that you made in terms of like being, I really like what you said. It's more about being proactive than being reactive. I mean, I think we're in society today where we're so reactive. I mean, there's so many different things being thrown against us, but that we don't even have enough time, or we're not proactive enough to actually be proactive.
Exactly.
But also what you said is interesting in terms of like supporting leaders. I think we're in a day and age today where it's very glamorous to be a leader. Like everybody wants to be some kind of leader, whether it's like, for example, the CEO title is very popular, the MD title is very popular. I'm a CEO, I'm a founder, I'm a MD, I'm this, I'm that.
Yeah, I'm building my own
But
business. What does that
there
really
you go.
mean?
Thank you very much. But there's not many people out there who understand what it means to be an MD, to be a CEO, etc. I mean, they just call themselves a CEO, but they don't actually understand the implications behind it. There's also lots of different ways of approaching being a CEO, which is quite interesting. Obviously, some people are more kind of authoritative, some people are more democratic, but then you do have these very interesting ways of being a CEO. So whether that's you're very focused on your employees and you're very focused on what they want and the customers, and then there's also, you know, that CEO, which, you know, that's focused on giving commands, on charge, on being very commanding and focused on trying to lead the team and focused on trying to get the team to take orders. For like a good example, I think in terms of like different CEOs, I mean, there was, I don't know if you heard of a CEO from, there's this company in the US. I can't remember what it's called, but basically like maybe you've heard about this. There's this guy, essentially he basically was making a lot of money from his company, and he was making so much money that his employees were complaining that they were making crap salaries, but he was making all of this like money or getting all these dividends from this company. So one day he was like, screw it, I'm going to make sure everyone's in the same salary, including myself. So everyone was on $70,000, including himself.
Yeah,
so he, you know that guy, right?
Yeah,
there you go.
I've heard about
And
it. I can't think of the
viral.
company, but I have heard of him.
Me
Yes.
too. Me too. Yeah. So everyone went on everyone went on the same salary, including him. And then as a result, that opened so many doors for him. That opened so many opportunities for him. And, you know, he became like a hero, essentially, all over the media. And I think Gary Vaynerchuk is also similar. I mean, he runs so many different companies. He's like a group CEO, and he preaches. I think he released a book recently, and he preaches the importance of, you know, empathy, having patience, having kindness for your employees, being focused on your employees, and just letting that do the winning for you. So this leads to my question, right? So, what do you think? What in your sense are the different types of leaders that we have today? And what are the challenges that you feel like leaders are facing today, especially stress and burnout, which is obviously one of your specialties?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a really good question. And I really appreciate it, actually, that you've sort of given a little bit more context and provided just some sort of like a little case study of what's really possible when we shift what we think a leader is or what a leader isn't. So, I mean, first off, there are a lot of really interesting studies. You can read a lot of books about different leadership styles, different ways in which people show up. Ultimately, I'm personally not very interested necessarily in defining something strictly, because I think that even as human beings, we're not one thing. And I don't think any leader is one thing. I think that we attempt things, we show up in different ways depending on the results that we get. And based on those results, we tend to show up that way again and again and again. So it's going to look a little bit different for everybody. But of course, there's sort of, I guess you can say, buckets that you can put people in. And I think that the two that you shared, I think that's a really simple starting point, right?
Mm-hmm.
More authoritative, maybe more collaborative. So I maybe want to use those two buckets. I don't want to get too in depth, because I think that would make this conversation a little bit difficult. But I think those are probably the two basic ways. And I think that you can add a lot of other components to it, right? So if you're a coaching leader or someone uses coaching-like tools with your employees, you're more collaborative, right? If you're a leader that maybe uses more mentorship or sharing more of your experience, you're more vulnerable. That's once again more collaborative. If you like barking orders, that's a little bit more directive and authoritative, right? So I think that those two buckets can really, I think, help to capture a lot of different ways in which we show up as a leader. Ultimately, we need both those styles, right? I think that leadership and being a leader and being really able to step up into that position is being open to recognizing that it's really going to depend on the context. So there's some really interesting, once again, research and really interesting books written about what I like to describe, or what is actually, I think, described called situational leadership or context-based leadership. And I think that's really the way forward. Recognizing that we can't show up as one way, because as human beings, we're going to show up differently throughout the day, right? And so this is where I, sometimes like to incorporate cycles, and recognizing that even as human beings, we have different cycles. It is a bit different for each gender, right? So for females, we have a little bit more of a 28-day cycle. For males, we have a bit more of a 24-hour cycle. But just really recognizing that even within whatever that cycle is, however you want to define it, you're going to feel differently. And because you feel differently, your behavior is going to be different, and how people respond to that behavior might also be very different. So it really just starts with ultimately just really cultivating that self-awareness. I'm going to sound like a bit of a broken record, but that also is the first step of what I teach and the first step of how I coach, really just supporting leaders. And even for myself, supporting myself to focus on how am I feeling right now? And based on how I'm feeling, like, how does this mean in terms of how I might show up? And then ultimately, what are the results that I'll get based on how I'm going to show up? And is there anything I can shift or change, whether it's about my attitude, my mood, right? That can allow me to create a bit more of a win-win situation if I'm engaging with my employees or if I'm engaging with clients, right? So a really quick example, even jumping on this call, I told you, hey, like, this is typically when I eat, I haven't eaten, right? And because I haven't done this thing, right, which is a very human thing. Sometimes we forget to eat as leaders, right? I think this is something that could potentially resonate for a lot of you on here. We don't recognize that not eating can lead to us behaving in a certain way, right? But not eating could lead you to be upset, annoyed, tired, right? And ultimately you'll show up and engage with people in a certain way that may not lead to the results that you want. So it really does start with cultivating your self-awareness. It really does start with reminding yourself that you're a human and not a robot, that you need to eat, that you need to sleep, that you need to make sure that you have some sort of wellness routine, whatever that looks like for you. And so what that means is you're going to have the capacity to be able to be reflective and really respond to whatever environment that you're in, whatever human beings are throwing at you, so that ultimately you're going to get the results that you want. All right. Perfect. So I hope that made sense, really. But I think it's really more of starting with yourself and where am I? And then if there's a gap to where you feel like you need to be in terms of how you have to show up.
Yeah, no, those are very, very good points. Akua, thank you for sharing those. And I think the important thing that you mentioned here is that it's important for us to look, to really just keep it simple, just to look at the basics. So if we're not eating right, if we're not sleeping right, just the basics. We're not sleeping right, we're not eating right. What else is there, right? Our diet is not right. You know, if we're not getting enough rest, if we're not getting enough exercise,
we're not working ourselves, working out, things like that. All of that really can have a massive impact on how you show up, I think, in your professional life, right? And we can even take it a step further if people are comfortable with that, right? Recognizing that your personal relationships will also have an impact on your business and how you show up within your business or within your career. I think for so long, we've tried to tell ourselves that we can have different parts of ourselves, right? That we can somehow separate ourselves from who we are at home and who we are at work. I think that one thing that this time has shown is that it's really difficult to do that. And we actually don't do that very well in general, right? I think it's just one of those stories we like to tell ourselves, right? Like, oh, I can do this. It's like, no, it's really hard. It's actually incredibly difficult to do that. And maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should make space for recognizing that, hey, I need some extra time. Hey, I need more rest. Hey, I need these boundaries so I can make sure that I'm eating well, so that the next time I go into a client meeting, I can come up with a much better, I can be a much better negotiator. It really could be that simple.
Yeah, it really could be that simple. And this actually has prompted me to ask you another question, Akua. I think what's quite popular also in this time and age is hustle culture, where everybody wants to everybody's like, I have to work 8 hours a week.
I'm so lazy. I tell people all the time, like, I am so lazy.
And then you have the 4-hour work week by Tim Ferriss. You have Tim Ferriss preaching the 4-hour work week, and then you have the person on the other end of the scale, which is like hustle, hustle, hustle. I gotta work 80 hours a week. I gotta work 100 hours a week to be looked, to be seen, or to be perceived like an entrepreneur, to be perceived like this big show, this big time show person. What's your thoughts on that?
So once again, like, I'm just going to go back to this cultivating self-awareness piece. And so I think the first bit is recognizing that, there's no one right way to be successful. I think that's really it. And I think that one of the things I've learned on this journey of being an entrepreneur and working for myself and deciding to really become, to become a coach and sort of step into this, using coaching tools and coaching frameworks to really support not just myself, but also my clients, is recognizing that, what is really truth, right? What is true? What is really, this is maybe getting a little big, but what is really reality? And recognizing that we each have our own version of reality. And within that reality, there are stories we're going to tell ourselves. There are assumptions we're going to make. So the first step is recognizing that we each make these assumptions for ourselves. So what is the assumption that I'm making for myself? And is it getting me closer or further away from whatever goals I've set for myself, right?
Yeah.
And a key thing here is also recognizing that each of us has a different definition of success. And that definition of success is going to be a combination of not just what we think success is, but maybe what our parents think, what our peers think, what that random TikToker maybe thinks even, right? There's a lot that goes into our decision making. There's a lot that goes into what we think is valuable and where we spend our time and energy. So that was a lot. So let me try and break it down and bring it all together.
Go for it.
But ultimately, right, these different ideas of what we need to do to be successful has really been different over time, right? And it's looked different as we've gotten access to more technology and as our jobs have shifted from being very manual-based labor, or at least those listening to this, has shifted from being very manual-based labor to being a little bit more information-based, more technology-based. And that's freed up our time, I think, in so many different ways. So part of it's also just recognizing that things have changed and the ways in which we can, generate income for ourselves has also shifted and changed. So I think that our definition of success and what we can do with the time that we have can also shift and change as well. But it can be quite difficult for some people, especially if you grew up in a family or you grew up in an environment or society where doing things that didn't seem productive or didn't generate a certain amount of income weren't necessarily praised, right? So really quick, right? There's some people who grew up in families that were like, you can't go play soccer. What are you talking about? You need to go have this job. You need to go do that. Sometimes it's because maybe that, that kid needed to support the family. Other times it's simply just that family had a value or had created this story that, hey, no, we don't want our kids to, participate in these sorts of things. We just want them to help to generate income because it's productive and they need money. And there's a lot that's wrapped up into it. So a big thing, once again, is just cultivating that self-awareness piece. But I mean, for me, if you're asking my own specific opinion on this, and once again, I don't tell my clients what to think. It's up to them to decide what success looks like. And they all work at different levels and at different amounts of time. But personally, I've never been a fan of hustle culture. I think that if some people engage with me or meet me, maybe they have this assumption that I do, simply because I'll hear people say things like, oh, well, you have no time on your calendar. You must be busy. It's like, yeah, I am doing things, but I also just don't want to leave my calendar open for people to just, talk to me whenever they want, because I like to sleep. I like to eat. And as I told you before, like I eat actually at a certain time almost every day, right? And so I put those things into my calendar. And so I block that off. So it's not that I'm hustling or I'm always working. It's just that I actually really like sleeping and eating and doing these other things. And so I've actually blocked it off to what I like to describe as be a human. So people might perceive it as I'm hustling or I'm always working, but I'm not. And I think a key thing here is also for us potentially to really dive a little bit deeper into people who believe they need to work 80-hour weeks. And I'm not saying that some people don't, but once again, for most of you who are listening to this, you probably have a regular 9-to-5 or you're an entrepreneur. And a key thing here is really just reflecting on, for the number of hours you work, what do you get in return? Right. And so once again, what you get in return, it might be financial incentives, right? So for a lot of people, they're like, oh, if I work really hard, I'll make more money. Is that true? It's not. It's not true, right? It's not a formula that holds in many situations.
True.
So it's really going to depend on what you're doing, right? And to some extent, we'd like to believe we live in a society that's somewhat merit-based, or that the value that you're providing, you're getting something in exchange that's equal or more, but it's not true, right? Because the people who provide the most value within our societies are not the ones who actually are receiving the most money in exchange. Teachers don't receive much money in exchange, yet they are the ones who are helping to form kids and what they will be 20 years from now, right? That teacher they had, in elementary school is really what's going to help them. That actually a huge impact on what they do 20 years later, right? Yeah. So there are a lot of assumptions, a lot of stories we tell ourselves, I think, within the different societies that we live in. They look a little bit different depending on where you grew up and who you're around, but a lot of them can be debunked, or you can shift them or change them or pivot them if you take the time to reflect on, hey, like, why is this something that I've decided I need to do? what am I really doing if I say that I need to work 50-hour weeks? What am I getting in exchange? And do I actually like what I'm getting in exchange? And am I getting closer or further away from what success looks like? And have I actually taken the time to define what success looks like outside of where I grew up, how I grew up, my brother, my sister, my boys? So I think those are really the pieces. But could I only work 4 hours a week? I mean, to take it to that extreme, I don't think so. But, I think that I'm just grateful that I have the opportunity to work in a space that I'm very passionate about and I really enjoy. So I think that when we talk about the 4-hour work week, I don't think it's necessarily just 4 hours. I think it's like, I enjoy what I'm doing so much that maybe only 4 hours out of the week feels like real work. That could potentially be it. I'm not sure, but I don't know many people who only work 4 hours a week. I know I couldn't only work 4 hours a week. I really like what I do. But I will say, like, in terms of thinking about my work, I don't get something financially in exchange for everything that I do as well. So is that considered work, right? So it's also how you define it as well.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Wow, lots of gems you mentioned, Akua, a lot talking points right there. I think you're right. The perception of success is subjective, so it does vary from person to person. One person's success, like you said, based on their role models, one person's success could be working 8 hours a week. One person's form of success could be working just 4 hours. One person wants to work smarter, not harder. One person wants to work harder because they enjoy the hustle. They enjoy it, and they actually enjoy.
Or they think that's what they need in order to be a human, right? So there are also stories we'll tell ourselves, right? And I see this even in my own family, like, unless like I'm breaking a sweat, I'm not doing real work. I mean, I feel like I'm doing real work when I'm sitting in my bed sometimes, like, just journaling or brainstorming because it's going to lead to something down the line. So, I think it's just a fascinating conversation to have with people. And it really just depends on their perspective.
Yeah, I guess, I think there are stereotypes that out there. So, society tries to dictate what success looks like. It's like how you're talking about how teachers give a lot of value, but they don't necessarily get paid as much. It reminds me of a conversation I had with my father, I think maybe a year or two ago, where he was talking about how, doctors, lawyers, dentists, people like that, they give a lot of value, but they don't necessarily get as paid as much as entertainers, footballers, celebrities, basketballers, music artists.
Really fascinating.
Really fascinating, really interesting, right? The way society is, putting these people on a pedestal, and they're making tons of money compared to someone who's really giving value to somebody, who really needs it.
Saving someone's life.
There you go. It's no more value though. Nothing is more precious than life, right?
Well, it seems like there is, right? It seems like sneakers are more precious than life. Selling Netflix. Sneakers is, right? So
Netflix apparently.
I mean, yeah.
Netflix apparently, yeah. So this is a very good conversation. For those of you that have joined us live on LinkedIn, YouTube, please hit that like button. Please engage with this post, and please let people know that this is great content, so more people can see this content. Please do get in your questions for Akua in the chat, whether you're watching on LinkedIn or YouTube. We will go into the Q&A session, providing questions do come in. We do appreciate this is a lunchtime session, so there may not be as many questions as usual. So if you do have a question for Akua, please get it in the chat. And please leave a comment as well. Let us know that you're watching. Let us know where you're watching from. We would love to hear from you, so that we can continue to tailor the conversation around your comments and your questions as well. We're going to go on a very, very quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about overcoming stress and burnout, getting tips on productivity. We're going to learn more about Akua's productivity hacks, her podcast, and also we're going to dive a bit more into her career and what she does on a day-to-day basis. So we will be right back, guys. Please do get your questions in. We'll be going to go for a 30-second break. Do not go anywhere. Hey guys, this is Adrian with a quick message from our brand new sponsors, Ice Cream and Ting. So, are you a foodie in the UK that finds dessert options on food delivery apps a little bit basic and uninspiring? Well, you need to get yourself some Ice Cream and Ting ice cream and indulge yourself today. They make small batch ice cream tubs with flavors that are rich and inspired by the African continent and the Caribbean. So, what are you waiting for? Get some luxury ice cream ordered straight to your door by heading over to icecreamandting.com and enjoy this experience like I am today. Thank you very much. Now back to the episode. Okay, quick break. We are back. That was just a quick intermission. That's our season 3 sponsors, Ice Cream and Ting. If you are in the UK and you are looking for some ice cream, please head over to icecreamandting.com. They make premium flavored ice cream with flavors from the African and Caribbean continents. They have plantain, they have strawberry, they have avocado. They have lots of wonderful flavors. Popcorn and peanuts, my favorite at the moment. So head over to Ice Cream and Ting, our current podcast sponsors, and get yourself some ice cream sent straight to your door if you're in the UK. Do you love ice cream, Akua? Do you love ice cream?
I love ice cream. Like I grew up eating ice cream like almost every day, but
Really?
I'm actually lactose intolerant. So,
That's a shame.
but luckily there is like here in
Tablets?
Accra, there's
Yeah.
like at what is it called? I can't believe I'm blanking on
Is
the
it
name
vegan
because
ice
I'm there
cream?
like
Vegan
they
ice
have,
cream
yeah,
over there?
exactly. They have
Or
like
a lactose-free ice cream kind of thing?
no, just like dairy free.
Dairy-free. That's the word.
Yeah,
I was
they have
looking
some
for,
dairy
yeah.
free ice cream. So it's been awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I mean, I do love the ice cream in Accra as well. I think Blue Skies is pretty decent, but
Yes,
there's
Blue
so many-
Skies is amazing.
Yeah,
But yeah, love ice cream.
Love it. Always cools you down in a warm day. Excellent. Okay, the Brew Show says we're watching from Ghana. Thanks for tuning in, Brew Show. Thank you so much. Emma Farr says interesting conversation. Self-awareness is the bottom line. That's true. Self-awareness is the
really
bottom
is.
line. I mean, end of the day, it's just like what you're saying. I mean, at the end of the day, society can dictate a certain level of success. Society can say this, society can say that. But at the end of the day, it's what is true to you. What rings true to you when it comes to success? Is it working 4 hours, 8 hours a week? Is it doing this particular thing? Is it doing that? Forget what everybody says. What do you truly want to do? What does your passion and purpose truly resonate with? And I think that's the bottom line. Self-awareness is the key. Very, very great point, MFL. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. All right. So yeah, let's continue the conversation, Akua. So of course, I know you've got a podcast, the Open Door Conversations podcast. Would you mind telling the audience a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So it's one of those things where I never wanted to do it. And I was really afraid to do it.
I remember.
And still, yeah, even now, when I put out an episode, you're never sure how people are going to respond to it. But ultimately, I really felt like it was the best way to sort of share my perspective. And more than that, once again, share my perspective and also sort of share frameworks and tools that people could use to define their own perspective or give themselves another perspective. So the Open Door Conversations is really about giving people the opportunity to hear voices, to hear thoughts from people, maybe from points of view they've never thought they could hear or never had access to or never wanted to, right? So a bit of it is like, oh, do I really want to listen to this? But okay, if I do, there might be something out of here that I can take. And just really just recognizing that one of the most profitable things that we can do is examine our beliefs, examine our assumptions, examine the stories we tell ourselves, and then recalibrate them if necessary. But it's always very important to create that time, that space, and to leverage your energy to do that. And I think that's something that a lot of the clients that I work with and a lot of the people that are interested in my work don't always do, right? They're not creating the space and time to even reflect so they can build their self-awareness to see if they enjoy doing what they're doing, right? So if you're in that rat race, if you're constantly overwhelmed, you're constantly firefighting, or you're constantly feeling like, hey, like, I'm not sure this is the right space for me, but you're not taking the time to really reflect on what's really happening and can I do something different or something better, or can I leverage somebody else? You're just going to continue on that same path, that same journey.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I mean the podcast definitely gives value, especially for those who are new to you, those that want to get an understanding or they want to get a taste of what you have to offer. And once they listen to it, they're going to get an understanding of who you are, of the kind of people you work with and the kind of topics and the kind of areas that you specialize in and you can help them with. And one of those areas, of course, stress and burnout, and productivity. I know those 3 areas you're pretty clued up with. So, I mean, talk me through. So, of course, you mentioned earlier on the clients that obviously you work with clients, of course. What would you say is a kind of like a what's your ideal client that you like to work with, that you would say? Because obviously I know you've worked with clients that do struggle with burnout, or they're more kind of reactive than proactive, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
And then maybe they have a little bit of stress and burnout. Talk me through, before we go into maybe tips in terms of overcoming stress and burnout and productivity, talk me through something like your ideal client. What does that look like?
Yeah. So I work with 3 basic types of clients. And I mean, of course, I can define it based on people's roles or titles, but I personally don't really like to do that. I mean, I could share that, but that's not, I think, the most important part of the work I do and the people I support. So I support 3 basic types of leaders. Yeah. So the first is what I like to describe as a reluctant leader. And I was very much the reluctant leader. And there definitely are certain situations and contexts that I'm still the reluctant leader. But just a lot of times that's a leader that has sort of been pushed into a leadership position, right? So for me, it was sort of going from being like a salesy type of business development person to being like a co-founder and managing director, and they recognize that, hey, what got them to where they are now is not going to get them to the next level, especially as they build out their team or building out their business, but they're really not sure where to start. And they're slightly reluctant to do anything different, because if you've been praised, right, or you've received something in return for how you've showed up, it's really difficult to do things in a different way. So that's really the first type of leader that I work with. And a lot of times it looks like, software engineers that become founders, and they're just like, wait, I code, I don't tell people what to do, right? Or, project managers that need to really step outside of that execution position and really become that visionary, right? So that's kind of the first leader that I tend to support. And once again, I think that any leader can sort of fall into that reluctant leader at some point in time, but that's sort of one of the biggest pain points for a lot of the leaders that I tend to support. The second leader that I tend to support is what I describe as the overwhelmed leader. And typically the overwhelmed leader is dealing with perfectionism, all right? They feel like there's only one right way to do things, or only one right way to show up. And because of that, you end up being very anxious, and then sometimes even paralyzed. Another way it shows up is as analysis paralysis. And so that's me. I'm, the leader that, if I'm faced with something that's unfamiliar, I'm like, I'm going to Google the shit out of this. Am I allowed to curse? I don't know if I am, but I'm going to Google the heck out of this. Right. Yeah. And, I'll be able to get I'll be able to figure out the way forward. But what happens if you tell yourself that is that there's not enough, right? You just end up going down this rabbit hole. For other leaders, it looks like, who do I please first? Do I please my investors first? So I work with a lot of founders within startups. So do I please my investors first? Do I please my co-founders first? Do I please my employees first? And I also work with a lot of founders who have families. Or do I please my families first? Right? So they have this stakeholder management issue. So they're overwhelmed with that. Others, it might just be overwhelmed with their tasks and responsibilities. And so what that looks like is that their to-do list is so long that they can never get anything done. It just never happens. Or there's a mismatch between what they're actually doing and what's actually leading to, making money or driving revenue within their business. So they're overwhelmed because they're not sure where to start. They think this is the place to start, but that's not what's really driving profitability within their business. So that's really the second leader. And then the third leader is what I describe as the firefighting leader. So that's the leader who typically is running around like a chicken with its head cut off, not really sure where to start. Other firefighting leaders feel like in order to be successful, they need to micromanage. They have to be part of the process, and they end up becoming that bottleneck. And so what happens is that they're not building sustainable processes that they need in order to be able to move forward. But because they're so sort of stuck, sort of running this race or within this, I don't know, this rat wheel, they're never able to get off, right? And they're never able to empower their employees to really step up either. Because what happens when you firefight or you micromanage is that your employees are like, well, they're going to do it anyway, so why should we step up? You're sort of sending this mixed message about what they should be doing, and you're not really leveraging your stakeholders. So a part of firefighting might be firefighting in your personal life, right? Where you only take care of yourself or things within your personal life when everything is burning down as well, right? So those are sort of the 3 types of leaders that I tend to support, right? So the firefighting leader, the overwhelmed leader, and the reluctant leader. And that's typically how they're showing up. Yeah,
I like that. Firefighting leader, reluctant leader, and the overwhelmed leader. Wow. Yeah. And again, it goes back to what you said earlier on, like people are, you have people that are proactive and you have people that are reactive. So the reactive one sounds like the firefighting leader. They're always constantly trying to put out fires, always constantly trying to, solve problems, and they'll spend too much time working in their business rather than on their business.
Exactly. So those structures and processes aren't there. So they're continues. The way it continues to be reactive, right?
Yeah.
What's whatever in their face, right?
That's
what
what
they're
you
going
said
to
about the
focus on.
hamster wheel. That's the hamster wheel you're talking about, right? Like you're never going to get out of that hamster wheel. And I feel like there's a lot of people that find themselves in that situation where they just keep going. They keep going. Got to keep going. Got to keep going. Got to keep going. They don't want to sometimes. And I think I mentioned this, was it last week or week before? I think this was like my phrase for the week. It was like, sometimes you got to slow down to speed up.
Exactly.
So when you
reflecting is slowing down. It's scary.
Yeah.
It's so scary, but you have to. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to really just take a step back, analyze the whole situation and just see, look, how can I overcome the situation? How can I put systems in place? How can I put structures in place and processes where I can overcome and I can get myself out of the situation where I'm putting out fires? Yeah. And then the reluctant leader, that's a very good one that you mentioned as well. There are people that feel like they know everything and or they insist that I must do it. I'm the leader, so I must do this. And I think nowadays you start to see a culture of people, let's say founders, for example, founders of company where they start the company and then they step away from the MD or the CEO role and then they focus on what they do best, which is maybe product or maybe marketing, maybe sales, commercials, or maybe legal, whatever it is, right? So you do get that type of CEO. So I think a really good example is, have you heard of Gymshark, the Gymshark brand? Yeah. So Ben
I know
Francis,
he stepped away for a bit, and brought somebody that was older and more experienced in,
Yeah, you said it. So Ben Francis, CEO of Gymshark, current CEO of Gymshark, he was the founder, he was the CEO. Then he realized he was that I think he probably fell into all those three categories. He was the firefighting leader, or maybe the reluctant leader. Actually, not a reluctant, because he had the humility to realize, look, I can't run this company.
He realized it eventually. Yeah.
There you go. And then he stepped away and he got someone else to do CEO and he shadowed that person and he came back as CEO. I mean, what a full circle, right? What a full circle to start off see as a CEO, go and come back as a CEO. He did that really well. And then when he came back, he even added people to his board like Gary Vaynerchuk, who's good in social marketing and that kind of stuff. So he not only came back as CEO, he brought his Avengers along. He brought people who were specialized in different areas to join his board of advisors to make him even stronger. So he was around, even though he was probably a leader, he was still around a team of people that could support him on different areas, even though he knew.
And that's really the power of awareness, right? And having that awareness and being open to receiving. I mean, I think that's another big thing as well, right? Being open to receiving that support and help as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And do you have any kind of stories that you could perhaps share where you're dealing with a particular leader, or maybe you've dealt with a particular client that struggled in the area of, they were stressed or burnout, they were constantly putting out fires, and then they came to you gave them some advice, and then maybe things changed in their business, and maybe it was something as little as something within their personal lives that they resolved, and then once that thing got taken care of, then their business results went through the roof, their performance went through the roof, and even things in their personal lives improved as well.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that's honestly the majority of my clients, right? In terms of supporting them with something, right? There's always a key, what they call like a domino sort of effect, right? When you find that key thing, that it can have this amazing multiplier effect throughout everything else. But the first person that comes to mind is a founder in the US, actually, that was just about to fundraise. And so he wanted to work with me to really make sure that he had the processes in place and that he had thought through all the things that could potentially fall through the cracks as he started to focus on fundraising, and really just recognize that. And I mean, you have to be very humble, right? To recognize like, hey, I need some outside help. I need someone to potentially support me with this. And so I worked with him to help him really think about, okay, what does he need to do with some of the different departments that he has? And then how can he also make sure that he's maximizing the amount of time that he's dedicating to fundraising? And then when he's in the office, how can he make sure that he's really showing up for whatever hours that he's dedicated to being in the office and supporting his team, right? Yeah. Because I think that's where you tend to see a lot of issues within startups when a founder decides to maybe take a vacation, go on maternity leave, right? Or start fundraising, because that's really going to separate them potentially from being in the business and really understanding what's happening operationally day to day. And so you have to get to a point where you trust your team members, you have enough processes in place, and they understand how to escalate if there is an issue, right?
Okay.
But if that startup is so dependent on you to make decisions and be involved in everything, right? Which is that more firefighting leader, right?
Yeah.
Then once you take that step away or that step back, everything's going to crumble. And everyone's going to be like, I'm out, because they don't want to be, it's not their business. It's not their baby. They're not going to love it as much as you, and they're not going to be okay necessarily staying up late, doing all the things that you might do, right? As the founder and CEO, right? And they're just going to be like, I'm out. So really recognizing that it's a really important for you to take that time to think through those pieces if you are a fundraising CEO. And I think, that's probably that's the first thing that really came to mind, right? So supporting this leader with thinking about what are those processes, and even more importantly, how he wants to show up, and making sure that he's communicating that to his team as well. Because that's another thing I don't think that's always done by founders really effectively, right? You need to communicate to them like, hey, like how I used to show up, what I used to be able to do, I can't do that right now, right?
Yeah.
So maybe in 6 months when I've raised the fund, right, and we're all good and we're secure, we have runway, we'll be able to go back to that. But, for this next however time period, I'm not going to be available in this way. So please make sure that you engage with me this way or that way. So being very clear about that and setting those expectations and setting those boundaries can really go a long way to build trust and make sure that everything's moving forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there are some people that go and find investment, but they're not ready for it because things aren't in place within their business, because all the investment is essentially is scaling up your existing efforts, scaling up the teams, scaling up the departments, etc. So if you're not ready, if you don't have the solid foundation, and you try and scale up too early, then it's going to crumble. Yeah, what are you scaling? Yeah, I mean, it's similar to, it's kind of like how I kind of tell people about marketing, like, how people like to do paid ads and things like that. Make sure that your organic marketing is working well. Make sure you got things in place before you add fuel to the fire, because paid marketing is essentially adding fuel to the fire. So you don't want to do that too early. You understand? So these are some very good analogies here. So yeah, I mean, in terms of these kind of leaders that you worked with, so what you've noticed that they've gone and they put things in place in their departments. They put systems in place where when they step away from the business can continue to run without them. And I think essentially that's what a business is, because if you step away from a business and it can't run without you, then you are the business. It's not a business, you are the business. So I think those are very, very key points that you've mentioned there. For those of you that have joined us in live stream, thank you for joining. Please hit that like button, whether you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn. Please leave a comment for Akua, who will be happy to take your questions today. You understand it's a Friday lunchtime, you're going to be out in the sun, you're going to be out and about, that's totally fine. But if you do have a question for Akua, please get it into the chat as we continue this discussion, which I'm really enjoying with Akua today. For those of you watching, thank you so much. Please let us know where you're watching as well. Okay, so let's move on to another segment of this conversation. So let's talk about productivity a bit for now. Maybe you'll come back to stress and burnout a bit later.
Sure.
So in terms of productivity, like, I mean, what kind of tips and tools are you using at the moment to kind of like make be I want to say a productivity junkie, but what tools and software and tips are you using, just to help yourself be as productive as you can?
Yeah. And I always love to clarify. I know that in a lot of my marketing, I talk about productivity, but if you have a chance to work with me or have seen any of my content or join any of my workshops, I'm actually anti-productivity. Or I redefine, right? I have a different perspective of what productivity sort of is. And so for me, productivity is really about value. It's about being able to spend as much time as possible on what you feel is valuable, right? And what, you can maybe even, connect it to your purpose. It's about spending that time and energy towards something that brings you value or is in alignment with your purpose. That to me is being productive, right? And so everyone can define it in different ways, but as I use that definition, right, to help guide where I spend my time and energy, for me, productivity, I think, has been defined in 3 basic ways this year. So every single year, what I try and do at the beginning of the year, sort of define, I give myself a set of values to live by. And those values are really sort of further broken down into actual behaviors. And so for me, there's basic things that I'm really focused on this year. I think the first one is something related to money first. I'm doing this off the top of my head. I usually have something beside me, but I've moved it, so I can't actually look at it. But I think the first one is something along the lines of being money first. The second one is like around prioritizing my personal life. And then the third one I think is fun, something along those lines. And so what I've done It's a little bit more than that, but what I've done pretty much is define what that looks like.
Yeah.
And so what that means is, in terms of how I set up my time and energy, first and foremost in my calendar, I always put my personal things first. So I put in, and once again, this is not something that's going to maybe resonate for everyone. So I want to make sure that's clear. Having a calendar, leveraging some of the tools I'm going to share specifically may not be for everyone, and that's okay. I'm just sharing what works for me. For some of my clients, they don't like using these types of tools, and that's fine. So for me, that means I'm making sure that I use Google Calendar primarily. That's my primary sort of tool of keeping track of my time and keeping track of what I want to do with my time. So I'm putting in, my morning routine and time for that. I'm putting in time to work out. I'm putting in my lunch. I'm very clear about that in my calendar first and foremost. And what that does is it gives me a better idea of putting in everything else, right? So first I put in the human things. I put in the things that are fun. I put in the things that allow me to show up and have conversations like this and feel good about it. Right? Because if I'm going for this element of fun, I have to feel good in order to have fun, right? So those are the first things I put in my calendar. And then the next set of things that I'm putting in my calendar or that I prioritize is around money first. Right. So really just making sure that I'm using tools to allow me to do that. And so a massive way in which I do that is, so I have my Google Calendar. So that's one tool, right? So giving me an idea of where my time is going and what to, how to fit things in. But the second thing is really leveraging something called Mixmax. And so Mixmax is a calendar scheduling tool. There's a lot of ones, a lot of other ones out there. HubSpot is out there. Calendly is out there, and they all have different like pluses and minuses, I guess. But for me, Mixmax has really been the number one thing. And what I do there is just leveraging that tool is I have like a hierarchy of different types of meetings that I will sort of meeting, I guess you'd call them meeting calendars that people can have access to. And based on whether or not I think someone is providing me with a potential opportunity to invest in me financially, I'll provide them one type of meeting type. And maybe I'll also give them more time. Right. If it's a different type of meeting where it's just a catch up, I might, provide them access to my calendar at a shorter period of time. And I know for some people that really hurts their feelings, but it really is not a personal thing.
It is what
it's
it
simply
is.
Because this year I've decided that in terms of the behaviors and what I'm valuing is really just making sure that I'm getting something financially in return. So those are just some of the tools that I use, and I guess some of the logic, right? So those are some of the rules that I'm also using to decide where I'm spending my time and energy. So beyond that, other things that I keep in mind in terms of really making sure that I'm getting value or I'm leveraging my time in alignment with my purpose is a lot of different note tools. The most common one I use is something called Evernote. And the reason why I use Evernote specifically is because it really syncs between all my different, tools, I guess you can say. So I use an Android phone, but I also use an iPad, and I also use a MacBook Pro, right? So it actually syncs between non-Apple products. So that's really one of the main tools I use, and it really is helpful for me. So I, a lot of brainstorming in there, a lot of notes in there, so that as I'm having conversations and as I'm talking to people, I can keep track of things and also keep track of my content as well. So I would say those are probably my three primary tools. So Google Calendar, Mixmax, Evernote, and then some additional tools that I do invest in. I use an additional layer called, so Mixmax is a really comprehensive product. It does a lot of things, but I use it primarily for its calendar. I use another tool called Streak for my CRM. And that's actually been incredibly helpful. So Streak is a great tool to help you keep track of your conversations within Gmail specifically. And so it also reminds me to follow up. That's also where I put tasks related to my clients or potential clients as well. So that's an additional tool that I use, an additional tool that I invest in to really keep me on track. And most importantly, keep me on track for my follow-ups, because I've decided that in order to make sure that I'm generating money, right? Money first behaviors is following up. So that's sort of once again, how I sort of think through, okay, how do I want to feel? What are the behaviors I need in order to feel that way and in order to show up? And what does that mean in terms of the tools and technology that I potentially invest in? And that can keep me honest as well and keep track of whether or not I'm actually living those values that I've decided on for the year.
Accountability, huh?
Yes.
You're enabling yourself to have accountability in every aspect of your life. And all of these tools you mentioned, I've used them, or I still use all of them except for Streak. I've never heard of that. I'm going to check the one out.
Okay, check them out.
But I mean, I love the tools that you mentioned. Evernote is great. I've been using Evernote, I think, since 2013, 2014. I've got it on my MacBook, my iPad, and my Android. But I am using the free version, I think, so maybe I'm limited to 2, perhaps. But I've been using it. It's a deal breaker. There's a lot of people that now start to use Notion instead of Evernote.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I
Notion's
mean,
the new one.
my thought, and this is one of the reasons why I think I told you this. Like, I don't talk about technology and tools very much because people get so stuck on them. Here's the thing: like, technology is not going to solve your problems. It's not. You need to be very much aware of what that problem is and then what you're trying to do before you select the tool or the technology. And so I think Notion's great. I tried Notion way back when it first came out, but for me, I like simple. As someone, and I do invest in a lot of other tech stuff, especially for my website and other things that I've tried. But for me, simple is better. Simple is easier. And I think you can do some really cool stuff with Notion. But for me, it was just is way too much. I was like, no, I could get stuck trying to make this look cool. Do you know what I mean?
It's really true. Yeah.
While Evernote is just like straightforward.
Simple.
But if I was in like, not, if I was in Notability, I'd like constantly be like, ooh, I can make this cool and make this like this. And I'm like, no, I don't need that. That's not helpful.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get caught up in how cool something looks and feels rather than the practicality.
And is it leading to the results I want? Most importantly, like if you can do it like in Excel, like why use something more complicated?
There you go. Don't just follow the crowd. I mean, follow what's right for you, essentially. Yeah. So Evernote is great. HubSpot on CRM is good as well. Very highly recommended. Very user friendly. In terms of calendar, Mixmax I've used it is really good for like snoozing emails and following up and stuff like that.
Yes,
really
it does so much.
So much. Yeah, I haven't used the product in a few years though, but I'm sure it's really evolved into a beast.
Yes. I mean, it's now. I mean, you can connect it with lots of different CRMs. I don't think they want to do their own standalone CRM, but like there's so much that you can do on it. The primary things I use it for are, like I said, calendar. Like I don't think there's any calendar better. And I've tried them all. Like honestly, I've tried everything. And I'm always, whenever something new comes up, I always will test it too. But the calendar and then the mail merge, that's what I use it for primarily. So sending, personalized emails.
Mail merge. Really, really good one. Because that's usually like a Google extension and you connect to Google Sheets.
So there's different ways you can do it. Yeah. There is, so Streak also has that mail merge version. And so you can use a Google Sheets. With Mixmax, you can upload. It's a bit different. It's like a separate kind of, it's a separate app, I guess, kind of. It's not in Google. It's not in Gmail necessarily. Streak is in Gmail though.
Streak is in Gmail. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, I'll look into that. Thank you for sharing some really, really cool tools. For those of you that's just joined us, I am with Akua Nyame-Mensah. So she is a coach. She's a former business leader. She's a facilitator. Obviously, she runs her own company, and she's a podcaster like myself as well. So we've been talking about how to lead in your profession or lead in your business without getting too stressed or burnt out. We've also been talking about what she does in a business and also what she does in a podcast, and also been giving some tips to help you get the most out of your personal and your professional lives. So if you're watching, please hit that like button. Please leave a comment. If you have a question for Akua, please get it in the chat, whether you're watching or listening on LinkedIn and YouTube, as we're going through these this last hurdle of a conversation here. Thank you for tuning in. So let's continue. So Akua, thanks for sharing those tools. Really, really useful. I think there's also actually I'm not going to go back into the tools, so I'm going to leave it for now. I was gonna geek out, but I'm going to relax a little bit.
We can geek out if you want.
We're not going to geek out. I don't want to get too much into technology. I want to make it a nice little rounded conversation, and maybe we can share some stuff afterwards. Okay, talk us through a little bit about. I mean, obviously you gave us a quick elevator pitch about what you do, talk us through. I mean, what the work you've done in the past. I know you've worked with some notable companies, Jumia, etc. You've worked with startups. You've helped to enable them, and you've helped to run some programs. I mean, I don't know if you mind spend a little bit of time, maybe a few minutes, just quickly talking about some of the projects and the companies that you've worked with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always think it's funny, like to start off by saying that I went to school to be a city planner. So I have an undergraduate and grad and like a master's degree in city planning, but I have never practiced as a planner. And so my first real job, honestly, was working actually in environmental education. So that was in the US sort of as a volunteer. And then when I first came to Ghana, I was working within sort of the USA, DFID, GIZ sort of space. And it was really interesting to sort of see a space and also decide that it really wasn't the space I wanted to be in. And so after sort of, not being able to find another opportunity within the development space, I was randomly recruited to join what is now known as Jumia. And so they hired me to launch and run their real estate classifieds platform. And I thought they were crazy because, as someone who has some level of understanding of sort of land, I wasn't into real estate. My background in city planning means I have an understanding of like land use, land registration. And I knew, having done my undergraduate thesis on certain areas in Accra, that land here was very insecure. And so if you have insecure land, that means whatever you build on it is also quite insecure. And it still is. And so I remember when I had that opportunity, I was very much like, yeah, I mean, I'll take it, but I don't think this is really ever going to work because like land is crazy here. But ended up working for Jumia for about 4 years. And so started in Ghana and built the team from scratch, try to figure out how to monetize it, really try and build the brand. And I think that we did a really good job. I mean, I had, without knowing that much about leadership or how to bring people along, I think that the team was amazing and really built a brand. And still till today, not only do people still reach out to me about real estate, but also members of my team, which I think is incredible because they sold the platforms. And the reason why I ended up leaving was because they sold the platforms in 2017. And still today, we get emails and calls sometimes because, we were using our numbers and things like that, where people are like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And I'm like, I don't do that anymore. But started in Ghana with that platform. And then that same company also took me to Nigeria. So also took over the platform there. So I've experienced sort of trying to figure out how to monetize and build out this platform into, 2 West African markets. And I think it was just really incredible to have the opportunity to do that. And that was honestly my first real job. I think for so many people that hear me, they're like, oh, you obviously worked in the US and blah, blah, blah. I was like, no, I worked primarily on the continent. That's really where most of my experience has been. And that's really where what I still do. And so after working at Jumia, I joined another company for a short period of time, but it wasn't necessarily a really good fit. And then just decided, honestly, on a whim, to start my coaching and consulting practice. And so I've really been doing that really for the last 4 years. And my work really is divided into 3 buckets. So the first bucket is really that one-on-one coaching. The primary, I would say, primarily working with founders and startup execs from fast-growing startups that have raised at least their Series A. That tends to be the people I attract within my one-on-one work. I do workshops and speaking, and with that really is across the board. So I've been able to work with some really awesome companies with my workshops and speaking, and really all around the world. So even with my one-on-one work, the majority of my clients right now are actually in the US. With the speaking, I think some of the biggest companies I've had an opportunity to do some stuff with is like Google startups. So did something with them. Let's see, actually paid work. Let's see, MasterCard Foundation. What else? I've done a lot of stuff. I'm not always, I'm like, I feel like I'm putting on the spot because I don't always talk about specifically the brands I work with. But yeah, you can check out my website if you want lots of brands on companies and logos on there. And then the last bit of the work I do, and the reason why my business is set up in these 3 buckets is that the last bit of work I do is doing a lot of stuff with, accelerators, incubators. I do a lot of work with like different fellowships, different organizations. And typically I'm giving my time for free or at a very, very low cost or stipend. So my one-on-one work and my speaking work and my workshops enable that. It subsidizes that. So it allows me to create space in my calendar to be able to do that additional work. And so some of the really cool organizations I've done work with are, the coaching fellowship. And the coaching fellowship does, we provide, regular high level executive coaching. And as an executive coach, your rates typically, some executive coaches start at about $1,000 an hour, right? So you're getting high level access to some of the best executive coaches in the world at a really low rate for some amazing female entrepreneurs. And these are socially oriented entrepreneurs and leaders. So that's, the coaching fellowship. And I love, it's probably one of my favorite things to do. I'm also part of the Stanford Seed program. So just joined it. And for both of those, you have to go through this crazy application process.
You've done a lot in your career.
to do both of those. So just joined Sanford Seed. So I'm looking forward to joining my first project as a consultant sometime soon. I do a lot of Google startup stuff. So just joined their accelerator as a mentor recently and did some work with them. And that was a lot of fun. What else have I done? I work with another accelerator or sort of ecosystem enabler in Germany called FemGems. It's always fun to mentor for them. Who else? As you can see, I can talk about those a lot easier, even though I don't get paid for them. I do a lot of stuff with Seed Stars. And then probably the one closest to my heart is the hashtag I'm Remarkable initiative. And so every month I do one free open workshop, and then I do a free workshop for an organization. So it's 2 workshops for free every single month through that. And it's probably some of my favorite content around self-promotion and really the importance of recognizing that being able to advocate for ourselves is closely related to being able to be grateful and also being aware of the things that we can do that are incredible. So that's kind of what fantastic. I do.
Fantastic. I mean, your hands are in different places, but at the same time, just as we've discussed it, Akua, that you are very organized at the same time. So it sounds like you're spread thin, but you're spread very organized in the sense of your calendar, in the sense of the way you set up yourself, your health, exercise, food, that gives you the energy and the strength to keep going. So well done. I mean, you're doing lots of amazing things. Hopefully I'm going to join you one of your workshops sometime soon when I come down shortly. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. I am conscious of the time. I put Akua's website on the chat, guys. So for those of you that want to connect with Akua, head over to akuanm.com, where you can get all of the links, everything that you need. So whether it's a podcast, whether it's programs, whether you want to work with her one-on-one, all of the information that you need, services, products, etc. That's all there for you to access. Before we close up, Akua, I wanted to know if you had any announcements and if there's any final kind of tips that you want to leave with the audience in terms of getting the most out of their personal and professional lives.
Ooh, let's see. I mean, first of all, just thank you so much again for this opportunity. I think this has been a lot of fun. We've had lots of conversations, but nothing really on the record like this. So this has been really a lot of fun. I think, I would say the only thing, maybe to just really mention is just to take space for yourself, right? You don't have to earn a vacation. You don't have to earn time off. You don't have to kill yourself before you take a break. Do it sooner rather than later. And also, if you do decide to take a break, it doesn't need to be 3 weeks. It literally could be a day. It could be half a day, right? So really just, give yourself the space and grace to define what a break or a vacation or what time off looks like for you, and take it sooner rather than later. If anything, I always recommend that having shorter breaks sooner is a much better than waiting a year to take to take 3 months off. Because when we talk about things like stress and burnout, it's about it's not about just taking that one big break. It's about recognizing that we need routines that allow us to breathe every single day. So there's that you can do that. And the faster that you can do that, the better you will be off. And I think that everybody around you will also thank you, because you'll be a nicer human being.
Yeah. That's incredible, and also I think even in the day-to-day, it's important to take shorter breaks, and there's lots of different strategies and ways to do it, Pomodoro and things like that, where you can kind of have lots of little bursts of breaks, and very short intervals between your work and your business. So there's definitely different ways of going about it, and I think it's important for everyone to find out what works for you. Some people feel like they can go longer before they take a break, but just don't burn yourself out, which is the key thing here. Great. Akua, thank you so much. How can people find you, and apart from the website on the screen, and if you have anything coming up that people can join you on, please do share.
So you can just find me, just Google my name, or just, if you're, I spend most of my time actually on LinkedIn. So that's where I'm most active and feel the most comfortable. So definitely, feel free to hit me up in the DMs and LinkedIn if that's something you want to do. In terms of upcoming events, every single month, I do host a hashtag I'm Remarkable session. My work is 99% virtual. Actually 99.9% virtual. I've only done one in-person thing. so far really this year. And I really love doing online work because you're able to have really diverse groups. And so when I do this hashtag I'm Remarkable session, which is completely free, I'll just make sure I reiterate that because people always ask, I'll get people from every continent. I mean, it's just so much fun, right? Someone, in Thailand, and sometimes they'll stay up really late because typically when I do them, it's not always the best time zone for them, but they show up, and it's a lot of fun. So if you're looking to sort of celebrate yourself, if you're looking for an opportunity to build those self-promotion muscles, or even once again, I equate self-promotion with self-love, with self-advocacy, make sure that you join my next session. So just go to my website /events and it'll pop up. It will show the rest of the sessions actually for the rest of the year. I plan them out way ahead of time because that's who I am and that works for me. So I have my sessions from now. I think the last one I'm doing is in November. I'm not doing one in August though. So if you want to join one, you're welcome to find one that works in your calendar. I always host one in the morning and then I host the next one in the evening. So it really covers everything.
Nice. So trying to get people from different time zones. Yeah.
Exactly. So it hopefully works in their schedule for one of them.
Yeah, Akua, you are an incredibly busy person, yet organized. And
I'm not busy. I'm not.
You are busy. You're busy.
I just have boundaries. I say no.
No to busy. Yes to boundaries. I love that.
Yes.
Akua, thank you so much.
As you can see, busy triggers me.
I noticed. Akua, thanks so much for joining us, and to you, the audience, thank you for joining us as well. You can get all of the links. You can connect with Akua. nm.com. If you want to connect with her, social media or podcast, just search for Akua Nyame-Mensah. Of course, the name is on the screen. And that's it. If you're watching on LinkedIn or YouTube, you can find more information about her in the description below. Okay. Other than that, we have another live session on Sunday. So please, come back, for that Sunday evening, GMT. So you do not want to miss that with Adjoa. She is the founder of Ghana in London and also the founder of the Move to Ghana Club. And she's also a super relocation coach. We're going to talk about how to learn. We can talk about how you can learn how to invest and relocate to Ghana successfully if that's something that you want to do. Thank you so much, guys. And till next time, peace.
Thank you so much.